Councilmember Lissay.
Here.
Councilmember Snoqualmie.
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Here.
Mayor Larson.
I am here. I have a motion to excuse Councilmember Mayhew from tonight's.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to excuse Councilmember Mayhew. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. May I have a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the agenda for tonight. Any discussion? You'd like to remove the warrants, Councilmember Shepherd?
Yes.
Councilmember Lissay?
I'm just wondering if we should consider reviewing the two items related to, I think it is the ordinance AB 19-80 and report AB, which is an AB 19-79 together, as opposed to separate. So is there a way to shuffle those so we can, because they're both, one's related to funding of the I-90 on-ramp and one's the agreement. I don't know how that would work, but I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, it would seem to make sense to take Agenda Bill 079 first on the agreement.
Yeah.
Without approving the agreement, there's no reason to talk about funding. So why don't we do as a, specify that when we get to the ordinances there, we'll just jump down and take that issue up first.
And they're both finance and administration, but just under reports and ordinances. So I thought I'd bring that up.
Okay? And please remind me of that, Councilman Lissay, when I get there.
Okey dokey.
Anything? Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, with that, we move on to citizens' comments. This time, we'll provide a time for citizens to comment on items that are not on the agenda. First, a few ground rules. First, Snoqualmie citizens who are not present at the meeting here tonight have the right to have their elected representatives perform their duties on behalf of the city in an efficient and orderly manner. Therefore, the comments of those who have taken the time to come here tonight will be limited to 3 minutes each. Second, please wait to be recognized. Come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. 3, direct your comments to the council as a whole and not to individual members. In order to protect the privacy rights of employees and to protect members of the public from legal liability, please note that this is not the appropriate forum or venue to make complaints or accusations about an implied or named employer or agent. Such oral comments will not be allowed, but can be submitted in writing to the city clerk. Fourth, please respect that this is not a time to ask questions of the council, mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. The council will quietly and respectfully listen to your concerns. And fifth, please respect the decorum of these proceedings, as all due respect will be afforded to you. And lastly, given that this is election time and in compliance with election laws, please refrain from any political campaigning at the podium or on video. So with that, is there anyone at this time who would like to speak? Becky, I'll start with you. You signed your name up too, so.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, citizens. Rebecca Bastian, Maple and Maple, and the Mayor Rose, where I live. And I just want to remind everybody that to speak clearly into the microphone, and I try to keep my hands away from my mouth, and then there won't be any confusion about the topics being discussed. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Becky. Fuzzy?
Thank you. Fuzzy Fletcher, 7749 Maple Avenue, Southeast Snoqualmie. I didn't sign up because I didn't think I was going to speak, but I wanted to give you all an update on the being able to hear in council chambers. Andy and the IT department have worked really, really hard to put some sort of apparatus together to make it happen, and it worked tonight. So it's the first night we're able to use it. I'm actually able to sit back there and, for the most part, hear everything that's going on, as long as we all use our microphones. But I just wanted to give you an update and say thank you for taking the time and expending the money for those of us that are hearing impaired. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Fuzzy. We'll let you know if we hear some feedback.
Pardon me?
We'll let you know if we hear some feedback. Anna?
Anna Sotelo, 7117 Almond Avenue Southeast. Couple of things. The first one is a really small thing, and it's kind of a Public Works. I know I brought it up in a Public Works committee meeting. I've reported it to Puget Sound Energy as well. 3 traffic lights are out on the parkway, and it really makes it dangerous when I'm on Almond Avenue. Makes it really dangerous, and it looks like someone's already gone over the curb and even knocked down the bollard, the metal bollard that's protecting the fire hydrant. So again, that's something I brought up in one committee meeting. I'm just hoping that someone will follow up with it. The other is, I've been talking to a lot about the signage, and I do see that the new sign came in down at the end, but there's so many inconsistencies of how they look and the different colors, and it's overwhelming, and you really can't read them. And it's discouraging to me to see that there's signs pointing to a grocery store that no longer exists. So I know that, it had been discussed in a CDC meeting and parked in the lot. And I would just like to see that come to life. As well as this is the third year in a row that I've just really seen what the tourism mecca is on 4th of July weekend at the falls compared to, Issaquah and other places, because I have driven through. And it's just the kind of things that we need to get on and get it done as far as knowing our tourism and to be able to help our merchants, because those are some of our priority goals that I thought that you guys planned. So I'd really like to see some of those things getting the bump up as far as CDC meetings, kind of like the YMCA, how that happened. About the YMCA, I'd really like to see some traffic studies, either the past ones or the current ones looked at. I think I had one more thing, but I might just leave it on that note. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Is there anyone else? All right, seeing no one move forward, we'll move on to the consent agenda. All items listed below will be enacted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the June 24th, 2019 regular city council meeting. Other approvals include Agenda Bill 19077, interlocal agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and Washington State Department of Social and Health Services for fire and EMS services for the Echo Glen Children's Center. Do I have a motion, council?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any discussion? Or is there any member of the public that would like to comment on any of these items prior to action? Seeing no one move forward. Any discussion, council? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Moving on to ordinances. Finance Administration Committee, Agenda Bill 19066, ordinance amending Chapter 2.5 of the Snoqualmie Municipal Code related to public records disclosure, providing for severability and an effective date. This is only for introduction tonight. And so if we could just have the summary statement.
The proposed ordinance amends the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, Chapter 2.50, in order to update references to provisions of the Revised Code of Washington, RCW, applicable to public records, provide for adoption of city's rules and regulations governing city's responses to requests for public records under Chapter 4.2.56 of RCW.
Okay, again, this is only for introduction tonight. However, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to possible future action? Anna?
Anna Sotelo, 7117 Almond Avenue Southeast. After sitting through the committee meetings on it, I understand it pretty fully. A couple things though that I'd really like to see, and especially because my name is on there quite a bit, I'd like to see something similar to like the state auditor, where once a record is requested, it's now where someone else can go and see it. I think that would save on a lot of time. I'd also like to see more of a commitment. I didn't hear council members really asking administration, will things that should be on the website be there? Because I would say 3 to 4 of mine are items that really should have been on the website, agenda items, et cetera. There's also these companies, random ones in Florida that request all kinds of not weird things, it's whatever they do, and that takes up a lot of time as well. But one thing, the biggest concern about it is, if we're now going to be doing this kind of thing, I would really like to see the software that I know that Jody has requested several times that always seems to disappear when we're budgeting. I feel that these things are priorities to make our staff's job easier, and we need to provide them with that. So when I talk about things like the YMCA being frivolous, these are things. We need to maintain our employees by giving them the tools for them to be successful. So again, I want to go back to, if we're going to kind of make these kind of changes, we also need to make it so that it's much speedier for them to do their job. Then it won't take us so many hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Anybody else? All right, council, any discussion? Councilmember Shepherd.
So I'm looking at the ordinance from Issaquah and comparing it to ours, and ours has got almost nothing in it compared to what they have in Issaquah. And I'm really concerned about, it seems like we've deleted what looks like possibly 80% of the original code to come down to this version of our code having to do with public records requests. There's no specification as far as what to expect when you read the code, as far as what the turnaround time should be, and things like that you can find when you read the Issaquah code. Also, we got an email today from the Coalition for Open Government, and they have some concerns about what we've written in our
I can't hear you.
Thank you. So one of the things that we got today was an email from the Coalition of Open Government regarding their concerns about our municipal code having to do, or proposed municipal code having to do with public records requests. And I think that some of their points are worth going through that I don't think that we've actually taken into consideration. I'd like to push this back into committee and look at their recommendations and see if we can do something. Also, in regard to not being able to index, looking at the city of Issaquah and some of their willingness to do reasonable amounts of indexing, such as primary contracts that we have. I think that would be worthwhile, having an index of some of the major agreements that we've put together. So I'd like to see a little more thought put into this code. I'm not in favor of this form right now that we have for this municipal code for public records requests.
Councilmember Lissay.
I was going to ask if the chair could maybe give a description of where this is coming from, because I also am too kind of confused that there's nothing here. There's nothing that tells what the process is or how that is. So how does that going to work?
Councilmember Lissay, could you
What's the intent?
you actually have a lot of slack on your cord. If you could pull that, there you go.
I'll be nice. Sorry. I didn't mean to do it, but if you could maybe give an explanation of where this is headed. Is there going to be something in the future that's going to fill in the gaps?
I'll let Bob talk to it for a minute, but I can at least express, we've had an excessive amount of public records requests, and this is at least to establish what we think is a reasonable amount of effort on part of staff to address public records requests on an ongoing basis. Second one is to take it out of the code, which gets to be rather hard to change, and promulgate the rule back with staff and have them the responsibility of what is the process to address public records requests. From there, before I say something entirely wrong, Bob, you want to talk to the intent here?
I think the chair has it correct. The city's public records procedures had not been updated, I want to say, since 2004. And what this ordinance does really is, in conjunction with another item farther on down on the agenda, the resolution adopting public rules, and essentially makes it easier for the council to regularly update the public records rules via resolution, which is the approach taken by the city of Kirkland. Interestingly, the comment that Councilmember Shepherd referred to that the city received from Coalition from Open Government was from Toby Nixon. Mr. Nixon was on the Kirkland City Council at the time when they took this approach to put most of the body of how they were going to respond to public records requests into rules that were adopted by resolution. That's the approach that is taken here. So while the ordinance may look sparse by comparison maybe to Issaquah's, it's very comparable to what other cities have done, and the bulk of the rules are proposed on this agenda to be adopted via the resolution, which I think is 19067. This is 19066, or vice versa. I don't have the agenda in front of me, but that's essentially what this does. And to allow, by going to the resolution approach, to allow for a hopefully more expedient approach by council in making more regular updates in the future.
Councilmember Lissay, continue.
Well, I was just going to say, okay, so the understanding then is that the resolution is clearing the deck so that we can then, it's clearing the ordinance out so that we can then adopt by rule as opposed to legislative ordinance. Is that still a council action when it needs to
Correct.
change in the future?
Correct.
It just isn't contained in the Snoqualmie Municipal Code. It's
Correct.
contained
It's
outside.
a resolution that adopts a set of Snoqualmie public records rules, and that's a separate document that's attached to that resolution that's in the later agenda item
Okay.
tonight, on tonight's agenda.
So last thing, and I'll yield to the other council member. So if we don't pass 067, what happens?
I'm
You
sorry.
would have to not pass
That's
another
the-
agenda item.
That would be, I mean, if we pass this to strip the ordinance and then don't pass the new rules, we basically have no public records request.
Adopted
Procedure.
procedures, right. Yeah, I would obviously urge the council to adopt some set of public records procedures, whether via ordinance or resolution, both are an appropriate method under the Public Records Act. And there's a set of rules, which, as I said, the council will take up shortly this evening. And certainly, if the council wants to entertain changes to those, it'd be appropriate for council to make those.
Councilmember Ross, I think you had your hand up, or no?
No, he already answered it. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I also want to make it clear that there's nothing in our local rules that would preempt state laws requirements on responsiveness regarding public records requests, correct?
No, and in fact, the public records rules themselves almost verbatim adopt the model rules that are recommended by the Washington Attorney General in a set of rule amendments that were adopted in mid-2017 or 2018. There's a couple fine-tuning mechanisms in our proposed rules, but otherwise they're, as I said, almost verbatim what the Attorney General recommends, so they follow state law.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So going back to Issaquah and their 1.28.030 maintenance of records, I'd really like to adopt their paragraph A, all substantive and procedural rules of general applicability, including but not limited to ordinance and resolutions of the City Council, minutes of the regular meetings of the City Council, and statements of general policy, and all public contracts, deeds, easements, and leases shall be indexed and maintained by the city clerk.
Any other discussion or questions, council, at this time? All right, if there's no further discussion, we'll move on to Agenda Bill 19080, ordinance amending ordinances 1210 and 1213, adopting amending the 2019 to 2020 biennium budget. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Mayor,
We're going to hold on this one.
do
Yeah.
that one, not the other one, yeah. Sorry, I didn't.
I was
catch
just
it that
testing
quick.
you. So remind me to come back to that. So moving down to reports. Finance Administration Committee Agenda Bill 19067, Resolution 1501, adopting rules pertaining to requests for public records submitted pursuant to the Public Records Act, Chapter 42.56 RCW.
Okay. This agenda bill approves a project agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the Washington Department of Transportation concerning the WashDOT I-90 westbound on-ramp project, the project. The project will create a second dedicated lane from Snoqualmie Parkway to westbound I-90. The proposed agreement.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Holloway, we're on Agenda Bill 067.
Oh, sorry.
And if you could just, don't read the motion, this is intended for action to correspond with the other.
That was 079. I know, 80.
Yeah, don't read the motion. Although this is a resolution, it could be passed tonight. We're intended it to coincide with, as Councilmember Lissay was pointing out, with the
Ordinance.
ordinance 066, all both pertaining to public records. So if you could just read the summary. This is just for introduction tonight.
Point of order. I thought he did the 079 to 080.
That,
We didn't move the 067 to 066.
We just finished discussing 066, and now we're on to 067.
so wait, so she's correct. We were on consent agenda for 08. We said we needed to handle 079 before 08. So I thought we were going to pull 079 up and then do 08 and then get back to the rest of the agenda.
I figure we were
However
doing-
Chair wants to
I figure we're
work it.
doing 067 and then we'll go on to 079.
And then 08. Okay.
Exactly.
Fine with that. Do we need an amendment to that? Are we fine? No? Okay.
Okay. The proposed ordinance amends the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, Chapter 250, in order to update references, provisions of revised code RCW applicable to public records, provide for adoption of city rules and regulations governing city responses to requests of public records under Chapter 4256 RCW. And
Okay. Again, only for introduction tonight. At this time, is there any member of the public, well, let's do a little,
6-7 or what?
Wait, what did you just read?
wait a minute.
What do we, I don't know what you read.
You just read 066 again.
Let's do this one more time. 067. Summary statement. It would be in the best interest of the city to adopt rules governing the process for requesting public records, responding to public records requests, and imposing such charges as allowed by law for the cost of providing requested public records.
thank you. The city clerk is much happier now. Right. Do we want to do, I mean, I think Bob already spoke to this a little bit as a cue up before asking if there's any member of the public that would like to, Anna, go ahead. Speak to this issue.
Anna Sotelo, 7117 Almond Avenue Southeast. I'd like to reiterate again, and I'd like to confirm, there is a need to update our public records request. There is a need to update our software so our employees can do the job better. There is a need to have things, for example, if we're going to compare to Kirkland, look at their website and see the kind of projects that they have on their website and really get that kind of information there. And I believe that will cut down on a lot of the public records requests. As well, like I mentioned, the state auditor's report, the way they have a section where you can go and look at all the ones that have been requested over a year from so many different people. So make it easier for the people, but you can't restrict it without updating the means to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna. Anyone else? Richard?
Richard Shields, 6701 West Crestview Loop, Southeast. One thing I'd like to point out is in looking at the state law that defines the whole thing with public records, like we've called out, some details about we've got to be careful to not risk destroying public records or harming them or things like that. That's way down in there somewhere, but way at the top where they state the whole purpose of it, the big purpose is the people own the government is there to serve the people, and part of that is to make public records really open and accessible. That should be the driving force to anything we do. And I think, if we focus on things like, oh, well, gee, what if we damage a record somewhere? That's not likely to happen. Also, I have several other things that I'll submit in writing because they won't fit into 2 minutes. But a couple of details. One is the thing about possession of cameras, mobile phones, things like that. Seems to me that would be an absolute thing we should be allowing, because otherwise people will just have to keep coming back to look at things if they can't bring home a copy with them. Now, granted, most hopefully will get electronic versions of things and won't need to, but I see no reason to not let people take photos of these records. And then also, I think the proposed number of hours is way too small, exceptionally way too small. Okay, I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else? All right, so no one else move forward. Council, any discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, we will move on to Agenda Bill 19079.
So, hold on for a second. Why are we not taking action on that tonight?
Because among other things, the rules provide for charging actual cost fees for providing records electronically as allowed by the statute. If you select that method, you need to have a public hearing before you adopt those rules. And the public hearing is scheduled for the next meeting on, I believe, the 22nd. to be consistent with when the council could also take action on the ordinance at the second reading. So
Okay.
that's, ordinarily, you could take action on a resolution at first reading, but because of the public hearing and because this is essentially married to the ordinance,
Okay.
it's proposed for action at the next meeting.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So are we able to make changes to this now?
That was the purpose of doing
was the purpose
discussions
of the
now. so
discussion.
there's-
Okay. So can we change it so that we can include a requirement for indexing for significant documents? Right now, I think we don't include that, and I think we should.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Can you state it as a motion? please?
Peggy, if you could speak into the mic so I can hear your motion.
Okay. So let me go back to, so I'd like to adopt what City of Issaquah has as far as their maintenance of records. It's their 1.28.030 maintenance of records, paragraph A. All substantive and procedural rules.
Point of order. I think it needs to be stated as a motion. You say, I move?
I
Just to
move.
make sure it's in there
Okay.
correctly.
I'm-
Just say I move to adopt section such and such of
Okay.
Issaquah's public record.
Okay. I move to adopt Section 1.28.030 of the Issaquah Maintenance of Records, paragraph A. Do you want me to read it?
Not necessary.
Okay.
Actually, it's totally necessary.
Yes.
I have no idea what it says.
Oh,
All substantive and procedural rules of general applicability, including but not limited to ordinances and resolutions of the City Council, minutes of the regular meetings of the City Council, and statements of general policy, and all public contracts, deeds, easements, and leases shall be indexed and maintained by the city clerk.
okay. All right.
Second.
Motion and a second stated by Councilmember Shepherd. And sorry, Councilmember Sunwell, she did read it earlier. That's why I thought it wasn't necessary, as long as we have the reference and Jody could capture that. But good point. Councilmember Ross and then Councilmember Sunwell.
So that statement is from a maintenance of records ordinance. Do we have a maintenance of records? Or does that fall under the public?
All right, or I assume
Request.
that's a title or category within their public records
Right.
policies and procedures.
Within their
Councilmember
public
Shepherd.
records requests?
Correct. The title of their section is Chapter 1.28, Public Records. That's one of the paragraphs under
It-
that.
to- That's part of their public records requests on how much they charge and similar to what we're doing right now? Or is that a totally different?
I believe in what we have here, we've said that we cannot do any indexing, and I'd like to not just make a blank statement, we cannot do any indexing. I think we should be able to do some indexing.
Can we ask why we don't do indexing?
Sure. For the existing city code that's been in effect since 2004 contains a determination as allowed by the Public Records Act that maintaining an index of all of the city's records would be unduly burdensome. And therefore, based on the council's determination as currently codified, the city does not have to index its records. And that's the common practice for most cities, and that's been the practice here. It's not really being changed by this ordinance, other than that section being edited somewhat by, and this is actually in 1906-6, the previous agenda bill, not the resolution. What Councilmember Shepherd, I think, is pointing to is a section in Issaquah's either rules or ordinance whereby they determine they will index some certain specified categories of records. I've not looked at that. That's not been a call to our attention before, so I don't know if they also don't index their other records. But that's the context.
Councilmember Sunwell and Councilmember Holloway.
So I don't know if this question is for Jody or not, but do we have the capability right now to index?
We currently index all of our ordinances, resolutions, minutes,
And agenda bills.
and agenda bills, and those are all available on our website, clear back to 1903. In order to index all of the rest of our records, we would need additional staff to do that. The council has approved in the budget enterprise software, which will aid in that and put those documents on our website. We're not there yet, but it's something that we're working on within the biennial budget.
Is that part of the ERP software that we
Yes.
approved on the council cycle? So what you're saying is right now, we index some portion of our stuff, the items you listed. With current funding and headcount as it is, we cannot reasonably index more than we currently do. However, there is a process in place that over time, once that system is installed, we would be able to do it. So
Correct.
directionally, we're heading in that direction, but without throwing additional resources and advancing that timeline, the current software timeline that we have, we would not be able to do it quicker.
Correct. Deeds, easements, those types of things are available on the King County recording website.
Jody, can you pull that microphone closer to me?
Is that the parcel viewer website?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you go into records on the King County website, you can access all of the easements.
But I guess question,
Deeds.
in order for us to index the easements, we in essence would have to do a search of all the deeds to collect what easements we have out there. That's where it is documented to create that index. That's a pretty labor-intensive activity to go through all the deeds for the city of Snoqualmie and determine what easements the city has out there.
Councilman Lasay?
I like the idea of indexing. I think it's something that's important to have available. It sounds like we do that on some things already, and I agree with Councilmember Sunwall that if software that's coming will do that. I have trouble with the any and all but not limited to type language in the motion that puts us outside of the boundaries of having any understanding of whether we can or can't do something, or what should be included, and that it's too broad of an action to say, that a public records request should be able to access anything. I think what I would challenge us as a council to do is to stay on top of the needed software, stay on top of the items that we do currently provide and index on our website, and to work towards broadening that as the technology will allow it. At this time, I don't think the motion is one that I can support.
Bob, did you have your hand up? Councilmember Stonewall?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to what Councilmember Shepherd has proposed. My concern is that we can't deliver on it without amending a budget. I am satisfied enough that we're headed that way directionally, that we'll get there. I'm just not prepared to, and I don't even know if throwing more money at it would help. It sounds like we would need more bodies, which I guess is more money. But I feel like we're heading there. It's never fast enough. But adopting this would put us on the hook to add additional resources immediately to make that happen. And I don't know how we would do that within the budget.
Councilmember Ross?
I mean, it sounds like once we have the capability of doing that, then we can amend the resolution to include that down the road.
Councilmember Lasay?
And I would encourage us to do that. I think that would be a good plan of attack, but we need the ability to do something before we say we can do it.
Councilmember Hallway?
So two things. One, I think the Issaquah wordage speaks to the maintenance of records. The issue that you're all getting to is you have to get it up to a stage under which you have something to maintain, and that's a pretty labor-intensive activity. Two, in regards to the comment of hours of inspection, if I look at section 4, paragraph A, public records are generally available for inspection during city's normal business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. I don't think that's an unreasonable amount of time for these records to be made available There is kind of wordage in here to say, let's coordinate that activity, but normal work week for that. Third, my question is, based on the conversation, is the honorable council member withdrawing his second? Mr. Lissay.
No.
I don't think it's
I think we need to
necessary at
vote on it.
All right.
Vote on the amendment.
Councilmember Summerall.
So, do we have any idea, I don't know if PJ's departure delays us a little bit, but do we have any idea about the procurement and installation of said software? Is this a year out? Is this 5 years out? Just doesn't really change how I might vote, but I'm just trying to get it, while we're talking about it, do we have any idea
I think it's,
when this capability will be in place?
I believe it's a 2-year project, if I remember PJ's words correctly, and Marilyn was here, but his absence, his departure will not delay that project.
Okay.
We've got obviously a project manager working with the departments to get it done. So we've got IT staff to help us, and I'll be proposing a interim director to Mayor Larson to the council in the next 3 weeks here, so we'll have someone else to take the spot, so.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So do we have some benchmarks as far as what things we're trying to accomplish before we get to the point where it's implemented? Normally, when you implement a system, there's benchmarks that are between when you start to think about it to the point where it's actually fully functional. Do we have that in place yet, that we can kind of say, by this date, this piece will be in place and so forth?
Not until we have the request for qualifications back and we select a vendor. Once that's done, then they'll have to get a project scheduled to us, then we'll start establishing those benchmarks. If I recall, again, the conversation when the council voted to approve that project.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Hold on.
What are we voting on?
The
The motion by Councilmember Shepherd. Councilmember Summerall, go ahead.
No, that's my question. I didn't know what we were voting on.
You're voting on what you were discussing for
I
last.
thought we were voting on like a new ice rink or something.
This is about adding the Issaquah section on indexing.
Right.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. So now we're back to discussing the Agenda Bill 067, about adopting the rules. And this is for discussion. Again, the action will be taken on the 22nd. Councilmember Lissay.
Okay, so no action being taken tonight. I think one of the comments, I think I perceived a comment that was made as being the time it takes to receive records from the city clerk and not necessarily the hours of the records, but just to clarify, let's see, what section is that? Section 6, subsection E, there are categories of 1, 2, and 3. Records request, it does indicate that a records request should take 5 days to fill if it's a common available item. If it takes longer than that, the clerk will advise on what the time will be, and depending on the category, that time could be anywhere from 30 days to 5 weeks to 6 weeks for those requests. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, we'll move on. All right. Agenda Bill 19079, GCB 31281, excuse me, GCB 31281. I did it again. GCB 3128, I-90 westbound on-ramp project agreement. Councilmember Holloway, now you can read it.
Okay, one more time. This agenda bill approves a project agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the Washington Department of Transportation concerning the WashDOT I-90 westbound on-ramp project, AKA the project. The project will create a second and dedicated lane from Snoqualmie Parkway to westbound I-90. The proposed agreement would provide for a city contribution of 50% of the project design, construction engineering, contingency costs up to a maximum city payment of $597,429. And this is for action, so move to approve and authorize the mayor to execute GCB 3128 I-90 westbound on-ramp project agreement.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve Agenda Bill 19079 is stated by Councilmember Holloway. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? Anna and then Richard.
Anna Sotelo, 7117 Almond Avenue Southeast. I just want to congratulate everyone for how fast it happened, and I know that the citizens are really, really grateful for that. One thing that Councilmember Sunwall mentioned in committee, and I just want to bring it up, is it's a real inconvenience as well. So if this is kind of being done to help Snoqualmie residents, it's a really big inconvenience when we're trying to go to on 18, or our employees are trying to, I guess, someone else's employees are trying to go down 18 between 3 and 6. As well, I'm doing some work at a friend's house over by Echo Lake, so it makes me want to pull my hair out when I'm in this traffic just to cross the freeway. So when I first moved up here, that right turn only lane was actually, could only go straight on 18. And at some point, somewhere around 2006, it changed where it was a right turn. So anyways, Councilmember Sunwall has suggested that maybe in the afternoon, when it's no longer really needed to turn right, because not a lot of people are getting on 90 at that time, can it be both? That people can proceed forward or right? The other, I understand that a lot of people whip U-turns. Maybe that's a great way to get some revenue up. Just have Snowpo sit over there and watch the people flip the U-turns. As well as the timing of the lights. It's so awful when I want to get from North Bend to Snoqualmie, and that's a real struggle. I always go 202 now because I never know. I know that Councilmember Sunwall had mentioned for that right turn only, it's a shoulder, you can't, and it couldn't be a right turn when getting off. That's a bummer, but something maybe with the lights and timing. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Richard.
Richard Shields, 6701 West Crestview Loop Southeast. I have just one minor comment in the context of this, in the context of one of the other agenda items, which is looking at the survey about the pool funding. And so when I was noticing on this item, we talked about possible ways of funding the 600,000, and I noticed one of the things that was mentioned as a possibility is a $20 car tab. And so that got me thinking, well, would this also be the category of thing that could be done with some of the money that's being talked about as possibly being used for the community center expansion? If we didn't do the community center expansion, might that money be able to be funding something like this without having to do a car tab? Thanks.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else? Fuzzy.
Fuzzy Fletcher, 7749 Maple Avenue Southeast. I read through the analysis that went with this, and while I absolutely applaud council and staff for just working their tail off and working with everybody else to try and get this done, I think it's a great project. The analysis says that sometime around July 16th, it's possible that the administration is going to put forth the idea of raising our car tabs by $20 in order to backfill 310. And I understand the need to backfill 310 so you have money for other projects. But I think you're going to hear a lot of people standing up here complaining about that $20 increase. So in the spirit of being transparent, I thought I'd bring it up now and we'll get ahead of the game. But we have to do something for it for future projects. But that's my 2 cents worth on whether or not it ought to be the $20. Thank you.
Thank you, Fuzzy. Anybody else? All right. Council discussion? Councilmember Sunwall.
So, before I get shut down, is this a time to talk about funding? It's sort of not germane.
It's the next one.
To this. Okay, so I will withhold my comment on the funding then.
Councilman Lasay.
I'm trying to understand, maybe, I don't know if we have a representative here that could answer the question. I'm looking at the anticipated project milestones, and now we're looking at December 31st, 2019 of achieving substantial completion. That's a far cry from the August we were talking about when we first started the conversations with WashDOT. Can maybe our interim Public Works Director talk to that?
I guess that's a great segue. I was thinking I should have him come up and give a presentation
Yeah.
before that.
Maybe give us the lowdown.
We think we can get.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of.
For Ben's sake, I do want to clarify that he's our interim Public Works consultant.
Okay.
Not
Yeah.
the Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for clarifying that. Thank you. We did really nice displays back there. This was Jody's idea, that she said, we got small pieces in the projector, it doesn't show, so can we paste it? And that's the on-ramp, starts from our arterial streets and merges with the, next one. This is a beach road plan.
Ben, you're going to need a microphone. Hang on a second.
Why don't I just bring this in front? Right.
Is that full size?
That's
Like a 1-to-2 scale right there. Jeez. How preliminary is this?
100%.
Okay, just want to make sure.
This is 100% plans.
Right there. Put up your podium. Straight towards council.
I think he's kind of making a joke about it. 100% preliminary, usually.
You have to have some savor of words, Mr. Mayor.
Towards the council, this end.
So this is our arterial streets. That's our wonderful parkway.
One.
And they will be providing, thank you, be providing a traffic island right there. So they're trying to make this right turn much easier. That is avoiding the current traffic conflict right here. When there's a through traffic here, it's very difficult to actually merge into this lane. This will make it much, much easier. The lane extends quite a while, and then we will have, this is where the wait station is, and I suspect that right about in that area, and past a little bit over, we will have the lane metering. Now, this project, it's amazing how you pull this thing, how you put this thing together. Again, I congratulate the mayor and the council and administration. I want to also thank the city attorney that I know that he was working around the clock just before the council meeting, that talking with the Department of Transportation, talking with the administration, trying to get the engineers like me to understand our language and make a sense out of it, put in the agreement. So Bob put lots of effort into this one too. DOT doesn't normally do this. There is a permanent project is about to happen here per their schedule in about 3 years. Here, they're willing to spend at least the $600,000 of their own money to make this temporary improvements, but they're saying it's going to last probably about 3 years. In terms of the schedule, Councilmember Lace, let me give you a couple facts. Apologize.
It's Lassie.
Lassie? It's not as bad as Yazigi.
You want to know, it's actually pronounced Lassay. But I'll take it. I've heard worse, so it's okay.
Project, I mean, obviously, it would have been nice that had we got this thing done earlier, but to be honest with you, putting together an interlocal agreement with the Washington State Department of Transportation and getting that written agreement before you in this short period of time, in my experience, is about lightning speed. Anyhow, so they're planning on advertising this project in mid-August. Schedule says August 12th. And expected execution of the contract is in mid-October. Now, after they execute the contract, what they call is a mobilization, meaning that contractor has to mobilize all the equipment to this job site. Normal contract standards require Department of Transportation to give 21 days. They're trying to shorten that period. They want to make that thing a lot shorter so that we can get this job done sooner and earlier. And that, they want to reduce that from 21 days to 7 days. So a couple things that these are all the good stories. Let me tell you a little bit the inconveniences that we have to put up with when this project is being built. There will be ramp closures 2 Saturdays and 2 Sundays. And these are not 24-hour closures. Obviously, we're going to make sure that those closures happen mostly evening hours.
Mark, can you flip back to that former
I'll
schematic?
bring the other one, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Mark had it up there on the wall. It's just, keep going back.
They had a bunch of fish crops,
There we go.
so they had to do this.
Should I take down so that it doesn't block the view of the audience here?
Sure, we can lay it on the table.
We hadn't spotted out.
Okay.
And Ben, there should be a laser on that tip of that. The top button is a laser. There you go.
Laser beams.
Let me check Mr. Larson's eye.
Not good.
Paving job, you have to close the ramp to be able to pave it. So it's going to take 2 Saturdays and 2 Sundays. And we are going to make sure that those closures are not going to happen in the holiday times, like a Thanksgiving holidays, or hopefully it will be done much sooner than that, but hopefully not coincides with the Christmas holiday, et cetera. Those closures are going to be, it's required some detouring. So if you want to get into westbound on, from the Snoqualmie Parkway, you will be going under the freeway and traveling east. At the next possible point, we will be making a left turn and using the existing
Exit 27.
Exit 27 there. So when I actually was talking with one of the employees, he said, or she said, this is what we do anyway in the most hours. So in a way that your citizens are probably accustomed to making that, and it's going to be only 4 days that we will put up with that.
And not weekdays at that, huh?
It's going to be weekends, Mr. Mayor.
Weekends, yeah.
Yes, and it's going to probably require police officers to help with the traffic control. Those pedestrian crossings that you put on the North Parkway project, remember it took about 7 months to order those poles? And don't ask me why those things take 7 or 8 months. In my experience, that I never understood, but they do. So we have in this project, as I said, ramp metering. That ramp metering, because it takes 7 to 8 months, because this project is an accelerated schedule, Department of Transportation already put that in order in place. So they want to get that thing ready when this project is ready to go to construction, and they will give it to contractor as part of or their specifications. They will tell them that's what we will be doing it.
Can I ask a question regarding that?
Yes,
So the ramp metering is for the designated on-ramp?
yes.
So it does not include resident or people driving from Covington and Maple Valley turning left? Yes. Their ramp's not going to be metered?
Not till they get on the on-ramp, but once they get on the on-ramp, they will be subject to metering also.
Going to have meters?
Everybody.
So down toward the end of the on-ramp, past the way station, shack.
It'll
there
be a-
will-
Is that when they're merging?
I think there's two
It'll
lines
be
of
a-
marks there. You see, Ben, all the way to the far left. Keep going to your right. Keep going to your right.
It's just past where the,
Keep going a little
the-
bit more
the
right
truck
there. You see
turnaround
two
is right
lines?
there. Those two
Two
spots
lines
right there.
across the ramps.
Yeah.
The lanes will still be split for the Snoqualmie Parkway traffic and the SR18, and there'll be a ramp meter in the middle,
Okay.
temporary, specially built for both lanes.
So one of the reasons behind that is when the whole major project is done, it will also be metered. And the way WashDOT is moving, everything new will be metered. It just end of story. That's their solution, even 12 miles upstream. So they didn't waste an opportunity to get it metered before the major project is done.
They want the capacity to control all regional traffic out of one command center by turning meters on and off, or control all those flows that access freeways.
Mayor made it very clean, the city administrator made it very clear with the Washington State Department of Transportation. Our goal is to get this project done before the end of the year, and they are really putting a good faith effort to do it. That good faith effort starts with ordering those ramp metering materials in advance of the construction of this project.
Or
Mr. Mayor,
in advance of agreement.
advance of the agreement. And Mr. Mayor, with your permission, there's one more fact that I would like to tell the council. Project duration is expected to be about 45 working days.
45 working days for the temporary ramp.
That's 9 weeks
Permanently temporary ramp.
or so?
Hopefully, maybe sooner than that. They usually put this relaxed schedule, but the goal is obviously to get it done sooner.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, 45, Councilman Lissay.
I just want to ask the $597,000 question, is that once open, will this temporarily 3-year ramp be closed during construction of the full project?
Yes. It will be basically closed, oh, you mean closed off and on?
Well, I mean, the whole purpose of this agreement with WashDOT was to have a way to get on the freeway that isn't blocked by construction during the construction of the full project. I'm asking the question is, at some point, is WashDOT going to close this temporary ramp situation and do some sort of a detour during the course of construction? And if that answer is yes, I'd like to understand what that implications will be and how often that may happen and how much of an impact it is, because that has bearing when we start talking about funding. Because the understanding of this is that this would be open.
Councilman Small, I sense your question is similar, so let's ask that.
It's not.
And then give, oh.
It's not, actually. So I guess I would view the purpose of this ramp differently. The purpose of this ramp that I saw was, while we wait for who knows how long for the project to actually start, this is to provide relief until then. But once that construction starts, this ramp is done, because that's their staging area. So the reason you're hearing 3 years is because they don't think they'll be putting a shovel in the ground for 3 years to start that project. But once they start that Uber project, that ramp is done, because that's their staging area. Am I right on that?
You're right on, Councilmember Sunwell. And then I didn't look at the question.
Councilman Lissay is asking a little bit of a different question.
Yeah, I look at it, the question from the perspective of Councilmember Lacey.
Lacey.
Lacey. I apologize if I'm not doing this thing right. City administrator asked me when we were reviewing the cost information provided by Department of Transportation. His specific question was, is there any part of this ramp that we can use that could be credited for us so the cost will be lower? And I looked at it, there really isn't any part of this thing. So this is the true temporary cost, this temporary use. After 3 years per Department of Transportation, we're done with the useful life of this ramp. But I have to tell you also, if I may, this will be much longer than 3 years. If the experience, I hope it will be sooner, but I know projects like this, mega projects, they take time. They haven't even started their EIS process, as I understand. They're still going through the scoping process. EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, it takes a single individual or individual agency to challenge it.
For a fish.
They're planning, not planning to do an EIS, but to do this under categorical exclusion, I believe. So they're hoping for a more telescoped environmental review process. That doesn't, not to take away from Ben's point that there could be scope creep and delay on a project that size.
Which increases the investment.
But as far as the going to a detour plan, the other thing WashDOT has told us is that the larger project they intend to do through a design-build project rather than a WashDOT Designs puts the plans out to bid. So WashDOT will not be providing the traffic control plans like they have here. So I don't think they really know when they might close things during construction before in stages. So they're going to have to wait until they get a design builder on board, I think, to answer that question specifically.
Yeah, I still want to address Councilman Lissay's question. I think the goal is to minimize as much as possible that you wouldn't end up with this, even as it converts from this temporary or auxiliary lane to the full project. They don't want months of this kind of diversion going on while they're building a new lane. I think they're going to, in other words, if we had never done the auxiliary lanes, they would have had to maintain at least a single lane of access westbound I-90 throughout the duration of the project in some form or another. So I think that's what your question was, Councilman Lucena.
Yeah, that's really what I'm getting at, is that we've referred to this as a temporary on-ramp during construction, and in reality is it's just relief of current conditions. Until construction, then construction will bring its own challenges for access, and I'd be fully speculative to try to imagine what a state agency with billions of dollars might do there, which has a not-so-good track record, not to say anything bad about our friends at the state, but, it's a state project, and those construction projects take a long time, and often go through multiple changes through those projects. But I'm just concerned that we're spending, rounding off to $600,000 on a solution to something we thought was one thing when this process started, has turned into just a temporary relief activity, and now we may still have an issue later, not knowing what the state plans are. So it's still better than we have now, and I'm still happy to support it and provide the funds for it. It's just, what's next? It's the unknown.
Well, I just do want to point of clarification, Councilman, to say that perhaps it was not described accurately to you before when the council gave the thumbs up to pursue the project. There's nothing about its role and function that's changed whatsoever. It was always understood that it might be as little as 2 years of value, and it's temporary, and it's a significant investment for something that might only last for 2 years and then be removed. The alignment varied a little bit, but other than that, its function is the same. Councilmember Holloway?
I understand.
So during committee, I requested you guys look at wordage to request WashDOT to consider retention of service once established. Did you guys come up with wordage?
Not as part of this contract.
Okay. A move to amend the agreement with 5.12, title being consideration of service retention. Wordage is, it is requested that WashDOT take into consideration the retention of this service once established to the extent possible to limit disruption of ongoing service.
I don't understand.
Second.
What does that mean?
Motion and a second is stated by Councilmember Holloway. Councilmember Holloway, you might need to now give a little more description for your fellow
So
councilors.
if we put this on-ramp in and then they start the project, which the overall ramp construction could take 3 years?
That's what they're saying, Councilmember.
So with your agreement right now, they could take this ramp out at 0, and you don't get comparable service back for 3 years. All this is requesting is that WashDOT take into consideration that once we have this service established, we retain it as much as possible through the new construction of the on-ramp. Period. Okay, whether that's they go ahead and do that ramp, the permanent ramp further in the project, later in the project, I don't know. I leave it up to them. I'm just requesting that once we establish this service and we've got direct on-ramp to I-90 from the Parkway, we try to retain that to the extent as possible. I requested wordage. I didn't get it, so you're going to get my gobbledygook.
Councilmember Summerall?
Is wordage the same as verbiage?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. So I understand what you're saying, but what you're actually asking them is you're putting a provision in there that says, hey, do your best, guys. Like, it's completely non-binding. And
Agreed.
it presumes that they wouldn't do that anyway. And,
Yes, it does.
okay, so I don't understand. And the last thing I want is we have an opportunity to do our best to expedite this timeline. And if we have to go back to them with another amendment that frankly means nothing, I know it makes you feel good, which makes me also feel good. But I don't want to delay the signature and countersignature of that contract 1 hour. And I'm just concerned that, we would literally have to, if we amend this, we would have to go back to them. Now, they might say, oh, yeah, sure, looks good, puppies and unicorns. But I don't think it's in either party's interest to rip that thing up. I will end up being surprised if during the project, that's still not used, because they can't prohibit. They are not going to spend 2 years with that reroute solution. They're going to have to provide some sort of access to I-90 westbound during the construction. And it won't shock me if it ends up being the temporary lane.
They're going to do a design build on this, which means their design build
Councilman
partner.
Holloway, if you could use
They're
the
going to do design build on this. So the major objective of the design build partner is to build it as efficiently, money-wise and time-wise as possible. That does not take into consideration retention of this service.
Which they can't, because they've turned that, they've delegated that to somebody else. So asking WashDOT to agree to this, do your best, guys, is sort of actually even more irrelevant, because they're gonna turn it over to somebody else who doesn't have to abide by that anyway.
I would hope that if we put this in there, they would communicate this to their design build partner as a consideration also.
Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember, I think your concern is well taken, that you want to make sure that WashDOT operates in good faith, and then we have we get the biggest return in our investment on this road. I have to tell you that they actually went above and beyond in terms of operating in good faith, ordering the signal equipments and the mast arms before we even signed the agreement, one. Two is, this is very unusual for WSDOT to do something like this within about 3 years of a larger project is in the horizon to happen. And if that may help you, sir, I'll make sure that we'll take a look at the ultimate project traffic control plans. How are they going to route the traffic? How are they going to deter it? How is that going to impact our community? I think that will be the probably best time to do it in terms of impact to our community. Lastly, as Councilmember Sunwell said, we make a minor change to this thing, even though it may appear to us minor, it takes time to get through these changes through that WSDOT. As I understand, time is the essence of this project. There's a construction season we're trying to get before November 15 on the grading part of the work and the paving part of it work. So if those answers satisfy you, sir, I'll make sure that I personally pay attention to the traffic control plans to minimize the impact to our community.
So,
Councilmember Jeans.
okay.
So actually, I appreciate our consultant public works director, his explanation. I'd like to hear from the city attorney about it.
I think Ben has accurately outlined the timing considerations and that we are pushing to get WashDOT to sign this as quickly as possible. And they have many more layers for this to go through, including the Assistant Attorney General, before they will sign off. Yeah, I guess the other two things to point out, there's language in the agreement right now that says when maintenance and operation 3.1, when the work is done, all the future maintenance and operation of the facilities belonging to WashDOT are at the sole expense of WashDOT and not the city. So, and that was one of the many provisions. We worked in this to protect the city from potential increased costs. Wouldn't surprise me if we asked WashDOT to essentially cede some of the control of the future operation of this to our language, that they would say, well, okay, where's the cost consideration of that if you want us to push out how long we use this and whether that affects the design builder, where's the city's participation in that phase. So that's what I think an elaboration on what Ben was saying. We asked for something that seems minor. We're not quite sure what they may do with it. Last but not least, Councilmember Holloway was talking about what the design builder will, has to, the target they have to shoot at when they submit their proposal, and that is a time when the city, through the stakeholder advisory group and the executive advisory group, can weigh in on what WashDOT puts out for criteria and ask that among the timing and cost considerations that the design builder has to meet is also to minimize inconvenience to the traveling public and maximization of continued use of the on-ramp without detours. I think that would be the way, maybe a better vehicle to get at ensuring minimizing inconvenience to your constituents, drivers, rather than try and do it in this project agreement, which is so far in advance of their process.
Councilmember Jeans?
So given what I've heard from the Public Works and the city attorney, it sounds like we have a document that has been, through give and take, been generally agreed upon. I'm just afraid with an amendment, it doesn't take it back to ground zero, but it just seems very conceivable to me that some attorneys got to say, well, you give a little, you got to take a little, so we've got to counter propose another little innuendo, and that will delay things, I'm afraid, too much. So I'd sort of discourage us from putting this amendment in.
Councilmember Holloway.
So I would concur with Councilman Sonwell's point that the wordage I have is non-binding. I will contend to you two things. One, it doesn't exist if it's not in writing. Two, I fail to see why we would not try to get as much return on our $600,000 investment on a project outside of our jurisdiction as we can, with a gentle suggestion to say, please consider retaining this as much as possible. Again, non-binding. The word is intentionally non-binding, but at least documents the consideration that they try to keep this service in place once established to the extent possible.
Yeah, we've made that exceedingly and abundantly clear to the WSDOT in our numerous conversations with them about this ramp. They understand the significant investment, the unprecedented investment from the local community, the communities of Maple Valley and Covington, and the tribe on this, and that they're strong, and that investment expects, some value as much as possible, or to be extended as long as possible. Councilmember Ross?
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, putting something in there, please retain this as long as possible, that really isn't going to get you much, other than pointing out that we want you to retain as long as possible. So I think it can continue to happen with conversations between city staff, our consultant, and WSDOT. And I'm not for the amendment. I think we should pass this so we can get the agreement going and hopefully have this done by the end of December.
Bob?
There's an option we have to, obviously, if the council were to approve this agreement and we would forward it to WSDOT, we could certainly put in a strongly worded letter imploring them of the same language that Councilmember Holloway's offering up. If that would help, I think it can. Having this relationship with WSDOT, as Ben Yazici mentioned, is significant in the fact that they're even willing to come to this agreement to do this. So we do have some leverage in that regard. They have no reason to want to throw away that kind of money either, frankly.
I figure we're going to get we own at least half of the ramp meters. We should get one ramp meter out of it after the project's done. Councilmember Sunwell?
We could do a hawk signal there instead of the. But, I move to call the question on the amendment.
Okay, it's been moved to call the question. All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, question's been called. So we're voting on Councilmember Holloway's motion to add the language as he stated. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Aye.
Okay, just for clarification, Councilmember
This is
Jean's
nay.
aye was an affirmation to a nay.
Say nay.
He meant yes, I say no. All right. Correct?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, the motion fails, 4-2.
Follow-up, I would appreciate a letter.
Yeah.
We'll share the draft with the council before we send it, but I can assure you we'll put in language to that effect.
Put a cover letter. All right. Any further discussion on the agreement, council? Okay, thank you, Ben.
Oh, one thing, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Ursay.
Again, minor item, but I think at some point, Chapter 5, under General Provisions, was renumbered, and there are several references to Section 6s in the agreement that you might want to just clean up.
We've
before it
already
goes out
got
the
them.
door.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. This is
I can't
last-
help it. I review stuff for a living.
And we appreciate the extra eyes. This is last week's version that went to committee.
All right, thank you, Ben. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, council. With that, we'll jump back up to ordinances and take up Ordinance, Agenda Bill 19080, ordinance amending ordinances 1210 and 1213, adopting and amending the 2019 to 2020 biennium budget. Again, this is just for introduction tonight. If you could just read the summary statement, please.
All right. This agenda approves an ordinance amending ordinance number 1210, 1213, which adopted and amended the City of Snoqualmie 2019-2020 biennial budget. The proposed amendment would delete Fund 310, Transportation Capital Fund, from the list of funds subject to the limitation that expenditures be only for projects included in an approved non-utility capital improvement program. The purpose of the amendment would allow expenditure of funds from Fund Number 310 to pay for the city's share of the temporary I-90 westbound ramp project, which will create a second dedicated lane from Snoqualmie Parkway to westbound I-90.
Okay, again, this is only for
Introduction.
introduction tonight. Do we want a staff summary or prior to opening to public comment there?
You can do public comment first if you like.
Yeah, okay. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this prior to possible future action? All right, see no move forward. Bob?
During our deliberations with WashDOT last week, we were concerned that the language was going to require us to deposit money with WashDOT, including all of our funds, without even taking in the receipts, if you will, from the Snoqualmie Tribe, City of Covington, and the City of Maple Valley. The language now it's a bit different in that we will not be paying WashDOT until they've been actually paying for the project and expecting receipt of our money at the same time. So with that in mind, through the mayor, I'm requesting that we pull this agenda bill. We have time now to contemplate our options. We certainly want to have those discussions with council. We had a couple options there, but there's no need to expedite this at this moment. And I think it would benefit us by having a few more weeks to contemplate this and get it back to council during a regular session of the committee, and then Finance and Administration Committee, and then if necessary, Parks and Public Works as well. But I think it'd be a better idea to have a thorough discussion on this.
Some of those options might allow, for example, it to be done in a resolution rather than ordinance, and could be still approved in the same time frame. Councilmember Sunwell.
Good. I was going to vote against this, and the reason I was going to vote against it is, and this sort of snuck by me at FNA. I'm an FNA rookie, but I share Councilmember Mayhew's concern about this in deleting the restriction on 310. I think we absolutely need to keep in place. My motion was going to be to adopt this as part of the CIP, not to remove the restriction on this money being spent on non-CIP items. So it's sort of moot point at this point because we're going to pull it, but I would encourage anything else that comes forward. I'm likely not in support of this because we're still waiting for the CIP. We're months into this year, almost 7 in this year, and we still don't have a capital CIP before us. And so I state that it's sort of moot, but I just want to make sure that whatever comes forward that will replace this is perhaps a resolution and not an ordinance that would affect the restriction we voted as a council to put on 310.
All right.
Councilor Losay?
Actually, that's a good thing to mention too, because I was actually going to vote against it just under the clause that we don't have an agreement yet with the tribe that actually guarantees the monies are coming from the tribe at this time, I believe. So let's get that in place as well and tie that in, because the total we will be paying is not 597, it's 597 minus the contributions from the other jurisdictions.
Minus 175,000.
Yeah.
Right, but we're the city of Snoqualmie is in name responsible for the full
Of course, but if we have agreements with those
Right.
jurisdictions and council to do that.
And we actually do have an agreement with the tribe as well. It's
Oh,
through the
okay.
compact, but we've got to work out some details, but
Yeah.
It'd be about $425,000 for the city, or $500,000, given some of the issues that, have happened of late with the tribe. I want to strongly emphasize, though, that the council said go forth with a thumbs up on $600,000. There was no direction or mandate that said to me, go see if you can find additional monies. It was, by my own efforts and relationships I had fostered with Maple, electeds down in Maple Valley and Covington, and analysis that I presented to them and pitched to them to see if they'd be willing to contribute, along with the tribe. And actually the tribe broached this issue, they brought it up during our discussions in the mitigation fund meeting on the distribution of the mitigation fund, so we welcome that. And the reason why I did that, and this will be another conversation to come, this thing has about 5 agenda bills attached to it. You're going to have 3 MOUs potentially with the respective contributors, the Covington, Maple Valley, and the tribe. And the agenda bill perhaps modifying the budget if this wasn't appropriate originally in the biennium budget, and of course the agreement with WSDOT. So it's a lot of moving different parts, and an approval, I certainly hope, of a temporary transportation benefit district, or TBD, $20 car tab fee increase to correspond with this one. I've always been operating from the worst-case scenario where this ramp might only last 2 years, according to WSDOT's initial assessments. And given that $20 would garner us about $230,000 a year, 2 years would garner about $460,000 or $450,000. So that was my goal in trying to find other funding partners, is to get us to where, in the worst-case scenario, residents are only paying that car tab fee while the benefit is there. It would not be well received, I think, if the temporary ramp was removed and the car tab fee is still being assessed. So to start it when the benefit comes into place, and when the benefit goes away, the car tab fee goes away as well. So those are all the moving parts that I was moving through in my mind. But Councilman, I say that the point I wanted to make is, in worst-case scenario, if those other funding sources collapsed or funding partners, it should be entirely irrelevant, because what was committed to by the council that set all this in motion was as much as $600,000.
Since it isn't irrelevant, let's make sure it's a done deal.
I'm sorry?
But since it isn't irrelevant, let's make sure it's a done deal.
Well, it would help in terms of determining an amount.
Yes.
Right, and Bob is pretty close to nailing down those MOUs, particularly with Covington and Maple Valley. It may take some more time with the tribe.
You want me to?
Or Councilmember, say that was your point, is more of trying to dial in more specifically the amount that we're,
Yes. So we
Okay.
know what we're dealing with.
and that's fair enough, yeah. Councilmember Sunwall, sorry for my long narrative.
They're never short, so I'm sort of used to the long part. So the question I had is, earlier in this meeting, I had asked when the right time is, if at all, to have the conversation on how it'll be funded. Not even this talks about how it's funded. This was simply releasing existing funds while we wait to figure out what will backfill it. So at what point do we, I mean, I can't think of a lot of ways to fund this, but at what point do we have the conversation about that?
We expect to bring it back probably within 30 days. If the expectation is you try to have all the council members as part of the discussion, we'll try to get it to a point where we think all 7 council members will be at the committee meetings and/or in attendance for a council meeting, if that's your pleasure. We do have time.
So are we going to be proposed, are we going to be given one option, like the administration's favorite option, or are there going to be multiple options that will be presented?
There'll be at least 3 options.
Can you articulate what those will be other than car tabs?
For additional revenue, not for
Right.
using existing resources. How would you garner additional revenue?
Additional revenue?
Correct. Additional revenue over and above what we currently have. For example, a temporary increase in car tab fees to $20 that would garner us $250,000 a year.
Well, that would be one of them. You could also look at a voted general retail sales tax increase.
But that requires a vote of voters, correct?
Yes, it does, yeah, potentially.
But that would not likely be a temporary one. We'd probably want to roll that into a more permanent one.
But I don't necessarily think we want to undertake a detailed conversation tonight about those options. We're still working through those in administration. There are a couple of, we want to make sure we've got those details and they're accurate before we bring them back.
But it sounds to me like there's only 2 options there's 3 options. 2 of them include raising new revenue, tabs and sales tax. The third option would be using call it whatever you want, rainy day fund to fund this.
And within that, there's probably 3 or 4 options within the existing funds we have. Yeah.
And to Councilmember Sunwall's point, it also goes under prioritization, because one thing we did look at, if you looked at the staff report on this, was that Fund 310, because again, we appropriated the funding, but but the council restricted it, but we don't have any projects attached to it. So if you're going to talk about priorities, I mean, we're definitely willing to give you the options of what you can do with that funding. This could be part of it, and then you don't have to look at, if you wanted to reduce somewhere else, there's not necessarily an increase in revenues needed. I mean, it's up to the council how they want to proceed with that.
Yeah, but the only way we can do that, hint, hint, is if we have a full list of capital projects, which I'm sure is coming by next council meeting.
My next council.
I mean, seriously, we're in month 7. Did anybody, when we decided to not allocate stuff last year, did we really think?
And that was part of the discussion in committee was, let's see what the list of projects is. If this were to prioritize above the line compared to all the other stuff, then we pay it out of 310. If it prioritizes somewhere else and 310 remains the same, but we're still doing this, then we need to go get additional fund to make this happen. But
There is-
that's all discussions that need to occur.
There is nothing about this project that looks like any other capital project in the city. Any other capital project in this city is a minimum of a 12 to 30-year investment in terms of benefit. This is a temporary project that lasts a little 2 to 4, maybe 5 years if the project gets delayed. I think it should be treated as such, and if the residents desire that, I think the residents, and I think there's strong support. You're basically asking residents, some, particularly 56% of my residents that commute out that doorway every morning, will you be willing to pay $20 per year to alleviate yourself of the misery in that morning there? I think the answer is not only yes, but hell yes. What are you waiting for? And we would be irresponsible, remiss to not backfill that money. If you basically saying to the residents, if you want a temporary project, you got to provide some temporary revenue for it. And it doesn't compromise, there was a comment about taking community center monies for that. I think that would be outrageous. A community center is going to benefit the city for the next 30 years of residents in this community, one of the youngest communities in the state of Washington. And we'd raid that to do a 2 or 3 year benefit or ramp?
Or a all-inclusive park or something.
Again, the discussion at committee was, let's bring the options forward and talk about it
Okay.
until we have, again, if it's not in writing, doesn't exist, until we have something in writing that we can start to look at and prioritize. This is all good conversation, but it's not definitive.
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Shepherd.
So if we talk about an increase in car tabs, will we have an end date of how long that they'll remain increased? Will they only be increased 1 year?
That's precisely what I would be seeking direction from the council. To Councilmember Lasay's point, once we firm up those MOUs with the funding partners, then we have a target of what our gap is. And I would hope, so let's say they all fall into place and we have a balance from us of $425,000. My proposal is we align, bringing the car tab fee online as soon as that ramp comes online, and then leave it online as long as, leave it online until one of two things occurs. One, the ramp is no longer in use and gets removed, then stop the card tab fee, and then if there's still a balance, we pick that up out of existing revenues. If the on-ramp continues for a while, and we've captured enough money in those increased car tab fees, let's say in year 2.5,
No.
to fully cover the $425,000, then we stop doing the car tab fee, even if the ramp maybe lasts another year.
So we're on the.
I don't know if I articulated that right.
No, you said it earlier, but you calculated it would take about 2 years of car tabs to
Right.
pay the $450,000 balance, and yes, it would be bound.
It's
Because
coterminous.
that money is paying for that project, and when that project is paid for, we're done.
And that's precisely the direction I would want from the majority of the council, is to say, when would you want it to start? When would you want it to end?
But it would be bound by getting to the 450 or 600, not
Right.
however long that thing lasts.
Whatever the balance is.
Yeah.
Whatever our
So
obligation
you
is.
would have it, you're going to have use longer than
Microphone.
you're paying for it. So the way things are shaping up is you're going to have that, you're going to be using it longer than you're going to be paying for it. The way it's going to go.
That's most likely what's going to happen, yeah. So we're trying to make folks happy.
And to answer Councilmember Shepherd's question, if the council were to adopt an ordinance imposing that additional fee, the council could adopt whatever sunset language it selected, whether that was a firm calendar date or a dollar amount or, or some combination of the two, whichever occurs first type of language, that would be council's discretion.
Councilmember Lasay and Sunwell?
I was going to move to send this to F&A, so unless you've got another comment, I'm going to do that.
Well, you don't have to move. It's not being acted on tonight, so it'll go back to committee for further discussion anyway.
Yeah, it's being pulled.
Oh, well, I guess it does say action on 722, so you're right. So it wasn't read into, so we don't have to.
Mayor,
You want to withdraw the motion, Councilman?
I don't know.
Back up.
Yeah.
my recommendation was, unless you want to change it, it would be to remove this from
Oh,
the council's
okay.
agenda.
In other words, bring it back perhaps in an
Right.
entirely different form,
Yes.
or a different proposal. Or Councilmember, let's clarify, you're saying,
There needs to be a motion to table this to committee, or refer this to committee, excuse me. We need to vote on that, and then we can come
And you
back
can
later at
make the
something else.
Modifications you need to.
And I think, Matt, you were doing that.
Yeah.
yeah, that way it gives it the option of not having to come back in its current form and be
Right.
changed at that point.
Am I still being?
Go ahead and make the motion.
I'm going
yeah.
to do it then. Let's just get it over with. So move to refer great. Agenda Bill 19-080 to F&A Committee.
Second.
I have a question.
Sorry, I lost where this was.
That's right.
Okay, motion and a second as stated by Councilmember Lissay. Sorry, there's a motion.
Yeah, she has a question about it, though.
I understand, but we'll get to the discussion once the motion and second has been made.
It
Councilmember
was already
Shepherd.
seconded.
Seconded.
I needed to finish reiterating that there's been a motion. Councilmember Shepherd. I'm trying to debate as to whether I want to do public comment on the motion, but go ahead.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think that we've had public comment on this yet.
It's
I opened.
We
it to
did
pub-
on the bill.
On the agenda.
On the agenda bill, yes. I opened it to public comment on the general,
Okay.
but I don't think we need to open it again for sending it back. Yeah. Anything else, Councilmember Shepherd?
No.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. So this goes back. Councilmember Summel.
So I don't want it to be lost on what I was trying to articulate with my earlier comment. I would like to know when we as a council will see a CIP. Where my calendar says month 7.
I can't give you an answer tonight.
Okay?
I will give an answer within hopefully 7 to 10 days, but we're working on it feverishly internally. But
Would you feel comfortable telling us, not that I expected you to tell me a date today, but can you articulate what has been and continues to hold it up?
we're trying to present the, I'll call a summary to the council. We need to brief the mayor first. We're also working on the fairly large detail, the storybook as well, so that if
Okay.
council wants to see that, then that's going to be available as well.
So progress is being made.
Yes, it is. I can assure you it is.
Okay.
Did the 067.
Good evening again, and this was one of my marching orders from the city administrators. The things that we are doing, actually, I started
Ben.
looking at.
Mr. Mayor, a point of order. I don't think this is an agenda item
No.
to have a discussion about CIP.
That's, I
That's
have to sustain, sorry. It's unless the council wants to
Bring it
do a
to
quick
committee.
ad hoc vote.
That's fair.
Where it should start as committee.
We'll talk about it on Tuesday.
All right. Thank you, Ben. All right.
No good deed goes unpunished.
Chair, I assume we're still are we in reports now?
We are still in reports, yes. Any further report for Finance Administration Committee?
Yes. Move to
Thank you,
approve
thank you.
warrants as stated in the agenda.
Second.
Okay, motion a second to approve the warrants as stated in the agenda packet. Is there any discussion, council? Councilmember Shepherd.
So I had questions about 2 warrants, and I've gotten a response on one, but not anything from the other. And the one has having to do with the 7 tons of gravel. That has come up twice, that it looks like something is being picked up from Snoqualmie and delivered out of the city. And I'm just wondering, can we get a correction on an invoice? To understand what it's actually we're paying for?
Is the committee chair asking for us to answer these at this time?
Well, that particular one, I believe we answered that the invoice title was incorrect, and acknowledged that in committee. So I thought per agreement, we understood that and had closed questions on that warrant.
And the vendor had modified their template and done a test run on a few and was
Yeah,
prepared
so
to correct.
it
Oh,
was
that was
a print
actually,
error.
that was actually the second time. That was after they'd done it the first time, and this is now the second time they've done the same thing. So we have tons of material going from Snoqualmie to outside Snoqualmie, according to the invoice.
We'll look at it tomorrow.
The invoice address was the problem. I think the invoice showed like a Renton or Kent or,
I think the yard and Kenmore. I
Kenmore,
did
yeah.
forward a response from the vendor to the members of the FNA committee and Councilmember Sunwall, who represented the committee last week, and to Councilmember Shepherd. And right on that, in that template, in that email from the vendor, it said that all future invoices will be corrected. So we have the documentation to back that up. And they did say it was an error. It's in that email that was provided to committee.
I guess the reason that I keep bringing it up is because that was in response to the first time that they did it. It wasn't in response to the second time, so it wasn't fixed for the second time. And I'm just wondering if it can be fixed for that invoice, since they said they would.
Point of order, Chair. We had an invoice which listed the city of Snoqualmie, it however listed the incorrect address for the city of Snoqualmie. We dispositioned that and agreed that that was an appropriate invoice and an appropriate warrant. Are we now proposing we withdraw that warrant or do something in regards to this agenda?
I'm not really tracking that as a point of order. It's a point of
I'm
protocol.
not here to work a vendor's invoicing process. I am here to work
I mean, I'm
warrants
going to
tonight.
affirm a point of order if you're saying that a question was appropriately and thoroughly addressed in committee or through email. I did see the email, and there's no assertion, or there's no conclusion that some tons of material went somewhere it wasn't supposed to go. It was a clerical error on an address, and that's been corrected or addressed. And so if it's happened a couple of times, perhaps it's been rectified now, and that the vendor has modified their system to make sure that, and ran a test run on some of those, as I understand. So, Councilmember Sunwell.
Do we know when the next, how frequent are these shipments?
Brian's not here today, so I'm not going to guess. I think I've seen him probably once every month or two.
Let me offer this. Let's at least do a little analysis with the finance staff and the public works staff. We'll get it back to committee.
Yeah,
next week.
all I'm asking is if it's coming up, like in August or something like that, let's just make sure that we got it right this time.
I just want
That's
to,
all.
I want to put closure to this.
Yeah, in other words, next time it happens, let's
Yeah,
see that.
let's just have our eye on that one, because they screwed it up twice. So let's
It's on
just make sure
multiple
they
people's radars,
live
so
up
we're
to
gonna
their commitment.
catch it, yes, absolutely.
So-
All right.
so-
I think we can move on. Next, what's the other warrant? item?
yeah. You had a second one?
The other one was fixed.
Well, the other one has to do with $175,000 for a vase as a gift, and it was using
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
public funds.
Someone spent
Ooh, back up.
$175,000 on a
No,
gift?
no, it's $175. Excuse me. No, I misspoke.
You got everybody's attention now.
No, $175.
If it's that much, it's called a Voss. Okay, not a vase.
$175 for a
Well,
vase.
the collectible
That's-
at that point.
That was a gift. And we were supposed to get some kind of, I guess, reimbursement for that.
That's been taken care of.
I was going to get, somebody was going to send me something about that, or?
Jody, take a note if we get that to her tomorrow.
Robert, do you know if that was reimbursed appropriately? So someone used a city credit card to purchase a gift for Londi, for her retirement, Londi, the former city administrator of North Bend, and then it was supposed to be reimbursed out of, staff often passes the hats for gifts and
Personal
things.
Yeah, it should have been personal, yes.
Personal.
And so the money was collected and then reimburses the city monies for that. But it shouldn't have been used in the first place, because that's even a gift of public funds
That's
to even
correct.
loan
That's correct.
city monies
And
for
we
that
flagged it.
purpose.
That's
So
correct.
I think we've already had a discussion with that employee not to be using a Visa card, correct?
I believe we had that discussion at FA and dispositioned accordingly.
Okay, so that was addressed at FNA. Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, moving on. Any other reports for FNA committee?
No.
I'm going to back up to Parks and Public Works Committee report.
No report?
Community Development Committee report.
On behalf of the chair, no report.
Public Safety Committee, any report?
I have a quick report.
Go ahead.
So I checked with both Chief Carrera and Chief Phipps about July 4th, and we have not had a public safety meeting yet. That'll be next week. But they did state that there were no significant calls for service associated with the 4th of July, which is good news. So,
Well, now that you brought that up, I just want to publicly put another shout out to Serve Snoqualmie and the ROA and the Church on the Ridge and all those that just make that a fantastic event, the July 4th. Again, just hundreds of kids and families out there just having a great time. It's, I think, one of the better events of the year. So big kudos to them
great event.
and all the staff that supported that as well. All right, with that, moving on to committee of the whole, I don't believe we have any items under committee of the whole.
Except,
Survey.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, okay, discussion on the city survey. Mark?
I get away with that one. Alrighty. So at the last council meeting, the group approved the EMC research agreement, and as requested, the group of questions were brought back to tonight's council meeting. The questions were actually added to the packet on Friday and were sent out to the entire council for review. I just did a little bit of research, and EMC Research, as you know, is a large research firm who specializes in these types of surveys. They have offices in 7 other cities throughout the U.S. and work with the city of Seattle, Austin, Texas, San Jose, California, just to name a few. As mentioned at the last meeting, these types of firms specialize in this type of work, and we should rely on them and their expertise when developing the survey. The city has used EMC Research for 2 other surveys in the recent past. So in an effort to get some of the questions answered before the meeting, I sent out an email to the group and asked if they had any questions to send them to me, and I received multiple questions from different council members, so thank you for getting those in. I also reviewed and mined a couple of questions off of social media where the survey was posted on Friday as well. Today, Joan Pliego and I had a conference call with EMC Research, their staff, to go over some of the questions that were raised by the council. And a conversation centered around, from EMC Research, the importance of the survey needing to be balanced with brevity, but also giving enough information to the layperson, in layperson's terms, to meet the intention of the question so they understand it and can answer it informatively. The following are some of the questions that were raised by some of the council members and that we discussed with the EMC Research team. Some council members raised concern about the length of the survey, and some of the questions that were asked were somewhat lengthy. In conversation with the EMC staff, they indicated that this is a pretty normal process for them. This is a similar format that they've used in the past with the city, and their staff is trained on how to keep the callers engaged on the phone and how to keep the questions and surveys moving forward. They established the length of it at approximately 12 minutes, which they were comfortable with, and they did indicate that if it got over 15 minutes, they certainly would be more worried about being able to keep those callers on the phone, but at 12 minutes, they're totally comfortable with that. Another council member raised the question about changing the terminology from the city of Snoqualmie to using the mayor and administration survey. In conversation with EMC, they indicated that the general population may not understand the nuances and differences between those 2 terminologies. It's also important to note that the survey is being used to gather information to make an informed decision about the community expansion, and it was approved by the city council, so our preference will be to leave it as the city of Snoqualmie. Quite a few council members raised the question about the number of pool lanes. That seems to be a popular issue. Currently, the survey, as you know, states that it talks about a lap pool. It doesn't give a number indicating the number of lanes, which could be concerning if the city chooses to use a 6-lane pool, but then only can end up purchasing or affording a 3-lane pool. In conversation with EMC Research, leaving the lap pool term broad does not jeopardize the integrity of the question, but this is one of those questions that the group should weigh in on and have a conversation about. They also discussed the scale, the 1 to 7 scale, and the order in which they asked those questions. It's a commonly used scale by EMC Research, and they're very comfortable with using that format. There were also a few questions about the policy related to the YMCA and their low-income use and the affordability of the memberships. This would be a better question for the YMCA, but if this project does move forward, it will be part of the discussion with the YMCA. And I will say I've heard from multiple times from the YMCA leadership that they will work closely with the residents and the city to make sure that they have access to the facility and that it is affordable for them. There were a couple of questions, this is the final one here, regarding involving building a larger facility and partnering with the Sideview Metropolitan Parks District. EMC did provide some initial wordsmithing, and one of the recommendations they have provided so far is they added information about partnering with Sideview and changed the language from a pool to a larger aquatics facility, so it's a little bit more broad in nature but captures the intent of what they were trying to do. So it's our intention tonight to capture the discussion but also get the proposed changes to EMC Research for consideration, hopefully by tomorrow. That's our goal, and with that I can take any questions that you may have about the survey.
Council? Councilor Semmel.
So the only thing I will say is that the number of lanes not being in the survey is mildly concerning, because I, for one, would probably not support funding a pool that was 3 lanes, and that's just me. But I would be very curious. What I'd like to be able to measure is the public's view on that. I don't rely on my opinion for much of anything, just standing alone. I'd like to understand what the community feels if we're going to spend this kind of money. Would they go, I'd rather not have a pool than have a 3-lane pool? I only want a pool if it's 6 lanes. And I don't pretend to know how to ask that. I just feel like capturing that piece would be important, because I'd also like to be able to crosstab that with some of the other data that's collected. So I also don't want to extend the survey any longer than we have to.
So along that line, just anecdotally, I sent a memo out about the executive summary from the community meeting on June 2nd, I believe it was, when we had the town hall meeting. And the number one choice of amenities within the pool was 6 lanes. So that was a conversation amongst that group, albeit anecdotal. But I'm pretty confident that the community would agree with you that 6 lanes is an important element of this. The question is, how do we get there?
Sorry, I need to interject at this point. I'm going to adamantly defend my proposal, my administration's proposal, 3 lanes, because it pertains to that kind of Goldilocks formula that the YMCA is the operator and who's taken the financial and operational risks, is subjecting themselves to in terms of what is financially feasible and viable for them. And I want to be respectful of that. And I also want to be mindful of the school district's role, that they have a strong interest here, and not compromise their position with them.
That's fair.
Councilmember Hallway and Councilmember Jeans.
So I guess my concern is questions 10 through 13 all boil down to, do you like the idea of a community center? I guess my preference would be that number 13 at least address, do you concur with the use of these funds on this versus the other priorities stated? Again, everybody loves cake, but we got to talk what the cake costs to decide whether we're going to do this. And I'd like one question that says, cake costs $10 million. It's going to take funds away from other things. Do you concur? So I would request that you change the verbiage at the end of 13 to say, how do you feel about using these funds versus the other priorities stated?
Okay.
I'm not sure what that list would be, Councilmember Holloway, of what things would be taken away.
You've got it pretty well in the summary, is pointing out that even though no new tax is going to the project, the existing team could be invested in more important priorities, transportation, maintenance, streets. So you've kind of at least verbally have those in there. I at least want who's answering the survey to acknowledge they're put to use that $10 million for community center versus these other things.
And what in that list doesn't get to your point? What in that question?
The only thing that doesn't get to my point is the last sentence, which is, having heard this, do you strongly support, somewhat oppose, or strongly oppose the expansion of the community center? Which is what the prior 3 questions also kind of ended with. I would like this one to specifically address, do you concur with using these funds for this purpose?
Mayor, I believe what the research group is trying to do is they're professionals, they write these questions. I think what they're getting to is the same thing you're saying in a different manner.
They're given additional pieces of information and then measuring as to whether that impacts their support.
It's progressive.
Correct. Yeah, it's progressive statements that lead through there, and then when you get to that final one, they provide the list, because basically that question asks what you're trying to get at. Talks about the $10 million in funds, that identifies the other competing priorities within the community, and do you still support this concept?
So I guess I respectfully disagree, because the prior 3 sentences pretty well end with the same sentence.
They end with the
I
same
would like one
question. They end with the same question, which is, here's, first of all, we're going to ask, before giving you any information, do you or do you not support this idea? Now let's give you a little bit of information, and then it's progressive. If you have this information A, how does that affect your support? What about information B? Does that affect your support? So now you're trying to get into nuanced measuring of what information, including the concerns you just raised. When you throw that information there, you want to isolate it and be able to ask it to measure how it impacts that support or not from a resident. And this goes back again to where these guys have done these things numerous times, and they know how to kind of separate or suss things out to try and measure those distinct attitudes. Or Councilmember Jeans?
So I had queried the use of adding 3 lanes or 6 lanes, so I'm comfortable with your explanation. And actually, I would say some things that are supportive of a 3 or 4 lane option, because I've noticed that Newcastle, they have 4 lanes, and at a certain point in time, there's a exercise class, and they can exercise classes mostly in the recreation pool, physically in that, but you can slide people over into the other 1 or 2 of those other lanes to do that. So I mean, there are multiple uses of those 3 or 4 lanes other than just lap swimming. I would think if it was just lap swimming, it just wouldn't get enough use. But I think it will get enough use, including swimming lessons and exercise activities. So I'm comfortable with the fact that let's leave out the number of lanes and let's just get an overview.
Councilmember Sumwell and Councilmember Shepherd.
So I withdraw my, after having read question 14, I actually like the idea of talking about uses rather than the number of lanes. There might be a lot of people out there, I didn't know this until a few months ago, that 6 lanes basically correlates with being able to do a swim meet, right?
Right.
So what they've done in 14 is they've talked about it from a usage perspective, not a number of lanes, so I'm supportive of that. The only other thing I wanted to say on this is that I certainly am not qualified to wordsmith here. I think our primary goal in this is let the statisticians and the experts do what they do. If we feel like there is a question or a topic that's missing, that's where I think our strongest opportunity to add or delete from this is, but not, I don't know how I can be in the game of wordsmithing. This would be like me telling you how to architect something. I'm not qualified to do that.
Councilmember Shepherd and Councilmember Lassagne.
So I looked up EMC research, and I found that their primary lot in life is for marketing, not just unbiased research. And I know that they've had some issue with something that they did recently in Seattle where they were supposed to release some of their research, and they don't want to do that. The courts ordered them to release their research, and they're appealing that. So and having worked in research, market research studies, and I know that you can manipulate research studies. It's very easy. So if you have a group that's in control of the process that really wants a certain outcome, you're probably going to get that outcome. So what I'm concerned about is I think the cost of doing this study is pretty substantial. And I like the idea of getting input from people, just finding out what the preferences are. But after looking at how hard it is to get responses when they did the SciView study in 2016, and they actually had a phone number for every single resident just focused on city of Snoqualmie. And they've got a very small proportion of surveys completed doing that over the phone, and then they had to use the rest of what is less than what we're trying to get online. I don't know. I think I read somewhere that we're going to fill in the blank if they can't quite make up those numbers of 300. Now, I did look up 300 in the theory of statistics is statistically significant. However, then there's always these, do you have leading questions? And I do feel that these questions are leading. And for me to go into each one of them and why each one may be leading would presume that I would accept that this organization is the expert that everyone else seems to feel that they are. I think that their purpose in life and how they make their money has to do with supporting an organization and its marketing goals. And I think that if we have a group in the city whose purpose is, or, their primary end result they want is to have this happen, then they'll probably...
Councilmember Schimmer, I'm going to interrupt you as a point of order. And ask you to refrain from making inflammatory and defamatory statements. I mean, you're impugning the reputation of a company that's not here to defend themselves. You're impugning the administration and its motives. We've conducted surveys for a number of years, often which are followed by votes. This may be followed by a public vote. There's simply no motivation which I would want to mislead the decision-making body here or ourselves from what the public might ultimately vote on. It guides how we direct resources. Most of those comments don't pertain to what's on the agenda bill, or not, I'm sorry, not the agenda bill, but the discussion item, which is discussing the content of this survey. Do you have any comments about the content of the survey, and could you please refrain again from attacking the reputations and credibility and integrity of every organization or person you disagree with?
So the presumption that I would make an edit to this survey would assume that I agree with the process and the organization doing it, which I don't.
Councilman Lasay.
I just want to say, Chief Kerr, good work. You've put some serious effort into pushing this forward and organizing the effort, and I appreciate the comments, and I actually agree with a lot of the responses that EMC has come back with. They have good reasons for those things. The one I do want to still look at is that the conversation around lap pool and warm water recreational pool. We tend to, the survey questions tend to have, specifically number 23 I'll focus on, just refers to a pool. And I've had a number of community members already come up to me saying, hey, we're going to have a competitive swim team in Snoqualmie, or the high school is going to use it for swim meets. And that's just clearly not the case. And I don't think the public really knows that yet. I don't think it's really out there that they understand that it is probably a 3-lane or maybe 4-lane lap pool for the items that Councilmember Jeans mentioned. So my proposal would be to, instead of just saying pool generically, to stick with what they described in the introduction of in question 22, which was a lap pool and warm water recreational pool. If we can do that, that at least keeps us consistency with the way the pool is described. Because the other reason that I think that's important is that it distracts from the expansion of the facility, which is desperately needed. I don't think there's a disagreement in that. I think that everybody knows that facility needs more space. And I would not want to have the survey tainted by everyone talking about a pool when it's not the pool that they think they're going to get. You know, these are not the droids you're looking for. This is not the pool you're looking for. We got to be consistent. And as Councilmember Holloway said, if it's not in writing, it doesn't happen.
Okay.
That sounds like I don't think EMC would have any problems with that.
No, exactly. Consistency is good.
I'm unclear what Councilmember Lassie is asking for specifically.
I think there's a Robert's rule.
I had a, oh, sorry, Lassie, sorry. I love question 14, because question 14, and then the answers I think are 14 through 21, really captures the majority, if not all, of, I mean, it talks about not just pool, expanded gym space for basketball, volleyball, multi-purpose spaces for events and classes, a spray park, you know. It talks about usages of that rather than numbers of lanes or even square footage. So if we come back from this and you know, it turns out that you know, a lap pool is way more important to people than a warm water recreation pool, which actually probably might be flip-flop given the age of our residents, then that's valuable information that then drives the number of lanes or the square footage of the facility, right? This is actually the least leading way, I think, that you can get to an accurate result. So, which is why I kind of withdrew my complaint about not having lanes mentioned, because I actually think this is a better approach. Imagine that, a survey company coming up with a better approach than someone who has no idea what surveys are about.
Councilman Ross, then Councilman Lassie.
So over the weekend, I gave this survey to my family. I went through and asked them all the questions. And it did come out that some of the questions seemed long, as well as the survey, but they were taking their time answering. So I imagine that over the phone, they're going to be a lot quicker, and it's going to be to the 12 minutes. But I like how, so EMC came back and said that's normal, that's what they do, right?
Correct, yeah.
I like how it starts out broad and then comes down to the detail of what we're looking for, what they would like in whether expanding the community center or adding a pool, as Sunma just said, number 14 through 21. I think overall it's a really good survey, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results. So we have this information, and I know that the Y also did a survey, and so that also and that was statistically relevant, so it'll be good information to have in both companies.
Councilman Lassie?
I'm just going to reiterate that I stand by that we need to be consistent, and if we're talking about a facility that is a pool, it's generic, and the proposal from the administration is not generic. It is specific. And I'm trying to get the wording again here because I moved my page.
Councilman Lassie,
Is a lap pool and warm water recreational pool.
Are you looking at another question now?
No, I'm just trying to reiterate that if we're going to be consistent, we need to be consistent.
We've captured that. I think we agree with that. That's a great point.
Well.
I don't think EMC will have a concern.
Councilmember Sundwell decided that he needed to say something, so I just wanted to reiterate that I stand by what I said earlier.
All right.
That's Sunderwall, okay?
Councilmember Sunderwall.
On the administration of, not your administration, the administration of the survey, can you just refresh our memories on when this would go to market, how it's being, the mechanism by which it's being done, and how long we expect this to be in market?
Sure, this is a telephone-based survey. Once we approve the questions, then they will get to work on starting making those phone calls. The goal is to get it out by Wednesday of this week so that they can start making those phone calls. They were trying to beat some of the summertime getaway. And do you recall the date that they wanted to return? I don't have it in front of me. It's supposed to be 3 weeks, I think, to a
August
month.
12th.
August 12th, yeah, middle of August sounds correct.
It'd actually be a week before that if we get it done this week, but yeah.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Councilman Ross?
Will there be any communication to the public that this is coming out? So if they see EMC research and they're on the phone, that they'll answer it? And
Now, one of the conversations we actually had with EMC Research is to make sure that the information goes out so that they're doing a true sample survey of people that are uninformed about the issues so that they can actually get a non-biased opinion of that. So I think by releasing that information, that they may get a phone call from a survey company, they may search the issue, come learn about the questions. So in conversation with them today, they actually wanted us to make sure that the goal is to get the questions to the people that will provide that feedback.
Councilmember Jeans?
I want to draw your attention to item 20, which says public events, plaza, and spray park. At the town hall meeting, Mayor Matt gave a concise presentation as to what we were here to talk about, the expansion of the Y. And it was almost a throwaway line at the end of that. You mentioned the idea of the spray park, which is a good idea, but I had the strongest impression that that was not part of the Y expansion, that was just future things that the city would be considering. And yet it's in this item as one for the public to give input on. And I'm not necessarily against that input, but it seems like it's a little apples and oranges here.
Do you want me to respond to that, or?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have heartburn one way or the other. I mean, it might be, no harm, no foul. I don't think it detracts or adds to the survey. It just might be interesting for the council to measure that. I think we are going to treat it as a separate project, because that's more likely we would pursue, like we did with the skate park, state grants to help pay for the lion's share of that.
Okay.
And the Y is, the expansion of the community center, we would approach more like we did the first phase, which was lease back, where we basically turn the land and the project over to them and say, you build it when you're done. Turn the keys over and we'll pay. So they build to the dollar amount. We don't take any risks on cost overruns and so forth. And we typically got better quality and on time. And then they can do a design build process too.
So given what you've said, I would suggest taking it out of the survey.
All right. Mark, I don't know if EMC would have any heartburn about that, but
I don't think it's really going to matter. So
it could be maybe spray park features within the pool. I mean, within the aquatic center, the interior. Like you have some like those little poles or umbrellas or the tipping buckets and stuff.
So where that list falls is actually part of the randomized, and people are asked to rate it on their scale of priorities. So the information we're going to gather from that is how important is that amenity to the public, and it's an important piece to measure, I think. But on the other hand, I think there's a way to build a bridge through the process of.
So it could be that context of measuring if it's a feature they want in the interior,
right?
Not necessarily the park that was proposed. Because again, most of the public isn't aware of that proposal. I'm sorry, Councilmember Holloway, and then I'll come to Councilmember Song.
kind of in response to Councilmember Sundial. When we started this discussion, we had talked about an advisory vote to, does the community want a community center, and did they concur with using the $10 million of available funds? Guys, you're not helping me shut up unless you have an unambiguous question that says the community agrees with that $10 million going to community center. I can't shut up. You are my opinion is, this is ambiguous in regards to that. You need to help
I thought
me.
there were a couple of questions that were pretty blunt about that, or they're not.
No, every question
So-
ends, do you support a community center? I may support a community center, I may not support you using the $10 million of available funds, okay? It's a binary question of, does the community support using that $10 million of available funds that could be used for something else to the community center?
Councilmember Sumwell.
So I would invite you to reread number 12, because after that lengthy explanation of how this would be funded and acknowledging that it could displace other projects, it says, having heard this, do you somewhat support, blah, 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 blah. So the context is,
Whoa, time out. Read the complete sentence.
having heard this, do you
Sentence in.
strongly support, somewhat support, blah, 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 the expansion of the Snoqualmie Community Center?
No, read the last part too.
That-
Uh,
No
that's-
more blah blahs, read the whole thing.
Somewhat oppose.
Each one of them ends, do you support the community center?
Read the whole sentence, Councilmember Sunwell.
The whole 12.
The whole, read the whole, knowing this,
No, having heard this, do you strongly support, somewhat oppose, or strongly oppose the expansion of the Snoqualmie Community Center?
so Councilmember Holloway, I can't understand how you're saying everyone asks, do you support, when it says, do you strongly oppose? Knowing this, do you strongly oppose the community center?
Knowing how this will be funded,
Take the preamble and all these guys, these questions end in the same question, okay? Do you support the community center?
Or strongly oppose?
Agree.
So I don't understand.
I have a question specifically that says, do you support spending $10 million of existing city funds on this versus other things?
you literally just reread number 12 and 13.
I started with number 13. If we were to change number 13 to just say, do you support spending these funds on this versus the other priorities listed? But
13 actually gets into a little bit more detail than that. It actually discusses the partnership with SciView and expanding all of those things. One compromise may be, and I was going to suggest this, is, and we can talk with EMC Research about it, is to actually separate the last 13 into two questions. One is about a partnership, and the other one is about that question that Councilmember Holloway is trying to get to. That may help answer what you're trying to
Again,
get
it's to.
a
series of progressive questions.
Correct.
And it's trying to elicit, so each time the person can respond, if they're going to support it or not support it. They don't have to say support each time. They can say, no, I don't support under those conditions. Again, it's a survey instrument, and it's about the community center. And they're trying to elicit answers about the preferences that these folks will be asked about the community center.
Councilmember Lissay and then Councilmember Sunwell.
The council voted to support issuing a survey. I think we've shown tonight that even at a council level, maybe we aren't statistically significant in the way we're responding also, or maybe we are. So the point is ask the questions, get the responses, we can disseminate that, but ultimately, in order to get anywhere with this, we're going to need a vote of the public to decide how they want to spend the funds, or if they want to spend funds on this sort of project. So we can go around the room and keep talking about what the semantics are of each question, but it's going to have to end in a vote in order to get past this at some point. So, my opinion.
an advisory vote?
Let's have that conversation.
Where you get to ask one question.
Clock may have run out, but all right.
No,
Is that an invitation to move on?
I was hoping we would.
I'm sorry, anybody else have their hand up? Councilmember Holloway.
So I thought, at least in part, the incorporation of the community center into this survey was to forego, to do this in lieu of an advisory vote in November.
I think where the discussion, as I recall, tell me if I'm wrong here, folks. When the debate was, should we do the survey or not, many of the council members in favor of doing that were, the suggestion was, this does not preclude going to an advisory vote. But what's likely to happen is if the results come back overwhelmingly supportive of the community center, I think your inclination would be, why would you need to do an advisory vote? It's pretty profoundly clear. On the other hand, if it's razor thin and it's well within that margin of error, then that may cause the council, the majority of the council to say, you know what, we would feel more comfortable going to an advisory vote. So at this point, I think you just need to give yourselves the benefit of seeing what the results of the survey are and then inform that next step in the conversation, would be my suggestion. No decisions have to be made about that next step at this time.
So we've approved the survey. We've approved doing a survey.
Right.
So I'm not sure what's left to talk about unless we're all going to become statisticians over here.
Coincidentally, Mayor, if I could add, the purpose of trying to get the survey done and get the results back was to enable the opportunity, if there was, if the council wanted to go to the advisory vote, there's a date certain in August by which you have to make that decision. Having the survey results back before that time would be, obviously, it would help inform that decision-making process.
The benefit the survey gives you is you get to ask, 20 some odd questions versus one in an advisory vote with very little information. So. All right. Sorry, Richard, we're not accustomed in discussion items to generally opening those to public comment, but any further discussion on this item in council?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, if there's no, well.
Oh,
There's nothing else on the agenda. Am I wrong?
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting. Is there any discussion?
Is it too early for that?
We have
I
staff
mean, usually
reports
maybe
on-
might open it. The staff reports are written, might ask usually for any other questions from the staff or any other announcements, but if the council wants to vote to adjourn, we can move on.
There's a motion and a second on the floor.
Right, now we're doing discussion unless you want to move to a vote or call the vote. Councilmember Shepherd.
so I remember an FNA meeting that they were going to have.
This isn't, whatever you call that, this isn't germane to the topic of whether or not we're adjourning the meeting, what she's saying. So we need to vote on that.
Well, I'll give her a chance to say what it is. It might be an argument to postpone adjournment for a minute or two. Go ahead, Councilmember Shepherd.
I thought we were going to talk about banning fireworks during committee of the whole. I don't know what happened to that.
Well, if you were, it wasn't brought up at the beginning of the meeting and wasn't voted on to be added. Would the council like to add that at this time?
Okay.
And we decided not to, during this meeting, we decided to do it in a future meeting.
We action that back to the safety committee. We action that back to the safety committee to have that conversation, get the level set, prepared, and then come back.
Okay.
So that's in
All
the
right,
safety
any
committee
further
action.
discussion on the adjournment of the meeting then?
Mayor, I just want to make one announcement if I could. This weekend, downtown's going to be extremely busy, and the weekend after, it's Thomas the Tank Engine weekend. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that in case you're wondering about coming downtown. Coming down and enjoying the festivities, but it's going to be packed.
All right, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Meeting is adjourned.
You were silent on that one.
No vote is a yes vote.
Yeah.